When UNC wins, I want to tell you, businesses win. Businesses win with lower taxes, with investments in port operations, low security costs, more forex, and a focus on growing micro, small, and medium enterprises. Businesses win with the UNC because we will establish a national commission on the banking and
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the press. Good afternoon, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and friends throughout the world. Tuning into our press conference this afternoon. I am ROODAL MOONILAL. This afternoon, we are live at a press conference in Chaguanas, Trinidad, headquarters of the United National Congress. There are several important matters of national importance that we intend to raise this afternoon, dealing specifically with matters pertaining to the conduct of the general elections in Trinidad and Tobago and the conduct of the Election and Boundaries Commission. These matters have been, some of these matters in the public domain for several months now, and today we'd like to advance some of those issues and some recent developments. This afternoon I have with me a political activist, a member of our team, the campaign manager for our candidate in the San Fernando East constituency, someone with enormous political experience and experience in marketing, communications, etc. A San Fernandian in her own right. Miss Wendy Lewis is with us. And Miss Lewis will share with us momentarily her experience, recent experience with the conduct of that poll in San Fernando East in particular, involving the personnel of the Elections and Boundaries Commission. And Ms. Lewis will also outline in detail complaints to the EBC as recorded by the United National Congress on the conduct of a specific matter in San Fernando East within the very recent past. So without any further ado, I'd like to ask Ms. Lewis to address you now, members of the press, on matters pertaining to the EBC and their conduct in the San Fernando East area in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moonilal. Good afternoon to our opposition leader, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessa, and everyone under the sound of my voice. My name is Wendy H. Lewis, and yesterday I would have witnessed, in my capacity as special polling agent for the United National Congress and the constituency of San Fernando East, which I agreed to oversee as campaign manager for John Michael Alibokas, the UNC candidate. I would have witnessed the signing of ballots for special voters. I arrived yesterday at 8:45 a.m. The returning officer, Mr. David Batu, greeted me and advised that I would be called in at 9 a.m. As I entered, I was led to a row of tables with Mr. David Batu, the returning officer, 2 independent officers, 3 assistants who weren't named, Mr. Michael Mohammed, representative for the People's National Movement, and Mr. Gill, a representative for the Patriotic Front. Mr. Mohammed stated he attended the opening of the ballot boxes on Saturday, the 12th of April, to which I was not informed. I asked Mr. Batu why wasn't I notified, who stated that it was out of his hands as the EBC is responsible for notifying the relevant parties. Mr. Gill also stated that he was not notified. Therefore, out of the 3 candidates for San Fernando East, only the PNM was present on that Saturday. We were then advised of the administrative process by Mr. Batu and given a list of 390 special voters. Mr. Mohammed left at 9:20 a.m. The process which followed included the initialing of 390 ballot papers in alphabetical order by the returning officer, which was referenced by the main list of special voters. Then passed to one of the assistants who placed the ballot paper in a small brown envelope. The small envelope mentioned was then placed in another brown envelope. The larger envelope was then sealed by one of the assistants. The other assistant then compiled in batches of 25 with an elastic band and then placed in a box. I witnessed the process of all 390 envelopes, which utilized just over 3 ballot books out of 10. At 12:50 p.m., upon completion, Mr. Batu requested a white piece of paper. He then asked all present to sign the blank sheet of paper, claiming it is the seal for the box. I interjected and stated, "Why are we being asked to sign a blank sheet of paper?" Mr. Batu replied, "That's for the seal." I replied, "Excuse me, this is not my first rodeo. The document should state the process just completed, and we sign under the said document, confirming." He replied, "We ain't have that form." I replied, "That is impossible. Surely this is not your first rodeo." The form is called an A45 form, which is the legal accompaniment for the content in the box, which then goes to the EBC. One of the independent witnesses showed the EBC guide with an example of the said A45 form, which I described. "You do not have an A45 form," is what I asked. I said, "Okay." The assistant then walked over to the right of the room and miraculously raised a box and retrieved the said A45 form. We all signed as it was the correct form, and we were seemingly getting ready to seal the box. As we signed the document, Mr. Batu held it in his hand and then refused to sign the said box in our presence. Mr. Gill from the Patriotic Front then asked, "What happens to the remaining ballot books?" Mr. Batu replied, "We send that up the road separately." I interjected again. I said, "What's the destination of the remaining ballot books?" Mr. Batu replied, "The EBC." I then said, "If the box is heading to the EBC, then surely the unused ballot books can go in the sealed box for accountability and transparency." Mr. Batu's staff member, a gentleman who arrived at 12:15 p.m., attempted to justify the separation of the items in question and refused to place the unused books in the box to be sealed and stated, "The box will get sealed." We were subsequently dismissed, and they stated the process is over. Myself and Mr. Gill would have left at 1:15 p.m. I immediately called my election agent and attorney, Mr. Ken Samalal, who was not available at the time. I called the other UNC attorneys and representatives and relayed what would have transpired. I made a call to our contact at the EBC and stated that this is not acceptable and heads will roll. In 3 minutes, at 3:15 p.m., I received a call from the said Mr. Batu, suggesting I return to witness the seal of the box, to which I simply replied, "Noted." I wanted to really soak in what I was being told. I called him back and asked, "What sense does that make? You asked us to sign the A45 form under false pretense, insinuating that you were about to seal the box, which you would never allow to take place. I do not know what would have taken place in the last 2 hours." Mr. Batu apologized, stating he was flustered. I replied, "Noted" again. He then asked if I do not trust the process. I replied, "Human beings fail daily. I trust God." I received 6 calls repeatedly, which I chose not to answer, as I am guided by UNC attorneys. I then sent Mr. Batu the following message via WhatsApp. "Good afternoon, Mr. Batu. Due to the hours between me leaving your office, which was 1:20 p.m., and the time you've requested me to return, 3:20 p.m., the legal team of the party has advised that I do not return to witness what should have been done in my presence initially. After we signed the form in anticipation of the box being sealed, the sealing of the said box was denied until 2 hours later. I am guided by our legal team and I will not be returning. I also note your apology where you stated you were a bit flustered, hence the issue. I am not surprised by any of which I just stated. I would have witnessed special voters process in the past. The call on behalf of my candidate, Mr. John Michael Alibokas, is for the immediate removal of the returning officer, Mr. Batu, and to reduce the process. Scrap the entire process. Have it redone, given all the evidential irregularities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wendy, for that chilling outline depicting several irregularities, possible misconduct, and at best, sheer incompetence on the part of those charged with the responsibility of conducting the upcoming general elections. Members of the press, you have heard of an account, first-hand account, of what transpired in San Fernando East over the past day or so. I wanted to put that in a particular context of our recent experiences with the EBC and some of the matters that ought to constitute a framework within which we can interpret the account of Ms. Lewis as she gave a few moments ago. Members of the press, it is our view that the EBC continues to misbehave whilst crying wolf when legitimate and genuine concerns are raised about the lack of transparency and fairness in its conduct of the upcoming general elections. I wish to give some specific examples. We complained before about persons who were openly politically biased being appointed as election officials, and we asked the EBC to conduct proper background checks. However, you will recall, it is only when a video of one Miss Alana Frederick sitting in her vehicle with a PNM flag with Foster Cummins' name on it, when that went viral, that the EBC finally relented. Miss Frederick was proudly displaying her PNM flag on her vehicle, driving around the marginal constituency of La Joqueta Talparo. In her conversation with PNM candidate Foster Cummins, she said she was obviously hoping for the PNM to come back in power, and she even broke into announcing a chanting a slogan common to the PNM. It is only when this kind of smoking gun evidence revealed itself that the EBC relented. But for the actual video footage, the EBC would have comfortably proceeded to appoint Ms. Frederick as a presiding officer. In fact, it must be a cause for grave concern that she was appointed to such an important position by the EBC in previous elections, and the EBC has remained conspicuously silent on the issue. Today, I therefore wish to ask Ms. Fern Narcisse-Cope, CEO of the EBC, to confirm to the nation the number of times Ms. Frederick was appointed by the EBC to assist in the conduct of local and general elections and the positions she held. What due diligence did the EBC do before it appointed her to serve in these important electoral offices? Could it be that she was appointed to serve in these offices because of her political bias and the fact that she was an open PNM supporter? We ask the questions. Our investigations have revealed that Ms. Fredericks has been openly supporting the PNM for over 20 years. Her family, friends, and members in the community have reported that she was actively promoting and campaigning for the PNM. How could the EBC justify appointing such an individual to conduct an independent election? Ms. Fern Narcisse-Cope, who is the PNM-appointed CEO of the EBC, has sought to dismiss allegations about her own political personal bias based on her close relationship with PNM candidate and Minister of Education, Dr. Gasby Dolly. While Ms. Narcisse has admitted her close friendship with the Minister of Education, she claims that this does not affect her ability to partially perform her duties. The UNC is not convinced about this and maintains that her relationship with PNM individuals is simply too close for political comfort. The CEO of the EBC claims that she can be independent and neutral, notwithstanding her childhood and school friends, who are all very prominent members and officers of the PNM and the whole high executive office in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Narcisse seeks to defend her cozy pictures with PNM officials and ministers by saying they were taken at official government functions. Apparently, Ms. Narcisse would have us believe that she is not politically biased, but she is not sufficiently motivated. Apparently, she is not sufficiently motivated to take pictures with UNC officials and former UNC MPs. The UNC continues to be concerned about her ability to conduct a fair general election. By letter dated 11th April 2025, General Secretary of the United National Congress, Mr. Peter Kanhai, wrote to the EBC to express its concerns, our concerns, about the biased conduct of returning officer Ms. Kathleen Watley, who allowed the PNM candidate in Couva South, one Aaron Mohammed, to drive with his entourage of political supporters straight up to the returning officer's office, while denying similar treatment to the UNC candidate, Mr. Barry Padarat, and his supporters. At a meeting held on 7th April 2025, the UNC's concerns about this returning officer was simply brushed aside on the spurious basis that the EBC could not remove a returning officer because only President Christine Kangaloo has the power to remove an election official. The UNC expressed its disagreement with this position and asked the EBC to share the legal advice and justification for this curious stance. To date, however, the EBC has simply ignored our letter. Somehow I doubt if the shoes were on the other foot and the PNM had made such a request that Ms. Narcis would simply ignore the PNM. If she did, the PNM would simply cry foul. Today I wish to ask Ms. Narcis to clarify the position for the benefit of all political parties and the national community. 1. If other videos of election officials openly campaigning for the PNM would surface, kindly confirm that the official position of the EBC is that it cannot remove such an openly biased official because this power resides with the president alone. 2. If the president alone could remove a biased and or corrupt election official, what is the procedure for having this done? Does the UNC have to file an application to the president? Is there a particular form we must fill out? We heard a moment ago from Sister Wendy Lewis that the officer in San Fernando simply took a blank piece of paper and asked her to sign and said that's a seal when there's an official form for that purpose. Is there a form to complain to the president to remove an election official? Does the president put on a trench coat, darkers, and go about conducting a secret investigation to get evidence to determine the extent of a PNM bias? Does the president conduct a hearing? What, pray tell, is the EBC's policy, practice, and procedure on this critical issue? Why is such an important issue not publicly being addressed by the EBC when there is no policy or guidance from the EBC? We have checked the EBC's website and there's nothing to guide us on this critical matter. Why is the CEO keeping such critical information a secret? Does the PNM know how to remove an election official and the UNC may not have that information? Is there ongoing private WhatsApp communications between the EBC and persons, officials in the PNM, whereby they are being given information about the process for removing an election official while the UNC is being denied access to such information? If the EBC has a clear policy on this issue, why has the EBC not responded to the UNC's letter to share such information? Why is it taking so long? Do we expect a response to our important query to appear after the general elections? Could it be that they are now devising a policy? The legal advice that the EBC obtains is paid for with taxpayers' money. Let me repeat that. The legal advice that the EBC obtains is paid for with taxpayers' money. It is not paid for by Mark Ramkerry money. It is not paid for by the commissioner's personal funds. It is not paid for by their grandmother saving. It is paid for by the taxpayers. We have called upon the EBC to let us see their legal advice on this issue, place it in the public space. It is in the public interest so that we can determine whether we agree with that advice or not. In the interest of full transparency, the EBC must disclose who its legal advisor or advisors are and what is the legal advice it has received. As we know, lawyers are heavily involved in politics. The PNM has given lucrative state briefs to its PNM friends and family. How is it that the UNC can ask about a process and presumably practice of removing an official, the election official, and we can receive no information on policy, on guidelines, on rule? Why is it that the CEO, Ms. Fern Narcis, is not providing the UNC with a response and a copy of the legal advice? How are we to know that the legal advice is not coming from a PNM friend, a school friend? How are we to know that the legal advice is not coming from the first gentleman, who I believe has also received significant briefs from the government? How are we to know the legal advice is not coming from the brother of the president, who has been made senior counsel and also receives state briefs? How are we to know that the legal advice is not coming from Dr. Rowley's personal attorney, Michael Kwamina, senior counsel? How are we to know? Who is advising the EBC on this matter? So we emphasize this issue of making the legal advice public and stating, of course, clearly the identity of the lawyer or lawyers providing that advice. The issue raised by our sister a few moments ago, the UNC's campaign manager for the San Fernando East candidate, the very distinguished Mr. John Michael Ali Bokas, is our latest cause for concern. How could an election official ask her to sign a blank piece of paper when Ms. Lewis was there practically begging Mr. Batu to inspect the ballot box to ensure that it was empty and sign as a witness to this fact? They kept her waiting for over 2 hours and then strangely tried to get her to come back later. Why is it that the EBC officials think that they can treat the UNC and its officials with such contempt? Why all these political games? How hard is it to fix a time and have a representative of both political parties and other political parties attend at the same time to witness and certify that the ballot box is indeed empty? What is there to hide? That is the question. In closing, I wish to remind the CEO of the EBC of the statements made by the Court of Appeal in the last election petition matter in the recently concluded local government elections for the electoral district of Lengua Indian Walk. Justice of Appeal Kokaram, at page 57 of the court's judgment, under the rubric Trust and Confidence in the EBC, the conduct of the EBC and prejudice to the appellant, the UNC's candidate, had the following to say at paragraph 135. It took an inordinate length of time for the EBC to identify this as the single issue of objection to the appellant. Its conduct prior to the petition being filed was a meandering process which moved from ambivalence as to the reason for the objection to uncertainty. There could be no simpler issue than this to reject a ballot, yet the EBC, for all its trained officials, was unable to telegraph its position pointedly to the appellant until after the election petition was launched. I had identified earlier in this judgment, says Mr. Justice Kokaram, I had identified earlier the importance of trust in the electoral process. This has a special socio-political significance for the electors of Trinidad and Tobago, having emerged from its colonial heritage and having to build legitimacy and trust in its own system of governance amongst layers of inequality, distrust, and suspicion created by societal division. The EBC's function in this is clear. They must be transparent, honest, open, and truthful. It must not engage in filibustering, ambivalence, or evasiveness. It is no excuse, as we have heard in these proceedings, says Mr. Justice Kokaram, It is no excuse, as we have heard in these proceedings, that letters were being issued by the EBC over the weekend. A matter as sacred as elections required from all personnel at the EBC to be working assiduously and around the clock. It is not for a year. It is only for a matter of a few days. A small sacrifice to pay for the larger reward of engendering legitimacy in the voting process and building faith in the organization as trustworthy to carry out its functions under the Representation of the People Act and to report to the population an accurate count of the franchise exercised by it. In my view, for these reasons, there was sufficient evidence before the court of unreasonable conduct on the part of the EBC in this litigation to warrant the court disapplying the general rule of cost following the event. Now, I will just summarize that. The Court of Appeal found that the EBC acted in an unreasonable manner. They acted without transparency, openness, fairness, and in some cases in a dishonest manner. And the identical experiences that we recorded and took to the court a few months ago are now reoccurring in the context of San Fernando East, the development outlined by Ms. Lewis, in the context of what had happened in the Couva South area on nomination day, in the context of one Alana Fredericks, in the context of other episodes and accounts which we have received over the recent past, some of which we will continue to outline and place in the public domain. Members of the press, these are very, very important matters in the context where it was the opposition leader, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, who had to undertake a campaign, a strenuous campaign, to call for international observers for the upcoming general elections. One wonders now whether there was some other nefarious intent to deny the presence of international observers, given this chain of events that we are revealing today. In the matter of San Fernando East, I reiterate the call that the returning officer, one Mr. David Batu, I don't know what he looks like, I don't know the gentleman, on the grounds outlined here, should be removed forthwith, as the returning officer for the San Fernando East electoral district. That process must be redone urgently to ensure transparency, to ensure trust, as the Court of Appeal outlined, to ensure trust in the election process and the work of the EBC at this time. Those are some of the matters relating specifically to recent developments which we wanted to outline, to place again in the public record that the UNC wrote to the Chief Elections Officer, Mrs. Fern Narcissus Scope, on April 11th, indicating the developments in Couva South, indicating the state of the law as it relates to that issue of removing the power to remove a returning officer. And in a nutshell, what we have argued in this letter of April 11, 2025, what we have argued in the letter of April 11, 2025, is while the EBC announces that there is no power to remove a returning officer, we have outlined in some detail the state of the law, the Interpretation Act, of course, that operates as a medium to provide resolution to matters where it is not expressly written in the law. We have outlined that in some detail, the Interpretation Act, Chapter 301 and Section 39(1)A, which provides powers that authorities such as the EBC can utilize to appoint but also remove persons on the basis of misconduct, on the basis of corruption. Because let's face it, if something happens, God forbid, and a returning officer is incapable of conducting his or her function, or, God forbid, dies during the process, they will have to be replaced in any event. So the law will provide a method to remove that person. So therefore, in the same manner, quoting the law, we have outlined how the law provides to remove returning officers and so on, using the Interpretation Act. And that letter has been in the public domain. It is dated April 11, 2025. The other matter surrounds, of course, some other matters that have been raised in terms of legal fees paid to receive legal advice and so on. We have been, of course, on this matter for several months. It is not the first time you're hearing this, members of the press. So today we call upon Ms. Fern Narcissus. I'd like to say, of course, that the chairman of the EBC, Mr. Mark Ramkerry, we are looking at you. We are looking at the conduct of the chairman, the CEO, and members of the EBC, commissioners and so on. We are looking at them. We are looking at Ms. Carla Drayton Edwards and others who are there sitting in that position now, and we will be addressing our minds to the issues of the EBC. Look, we believe that the PNM has its back to the wall. It is very, very clear. It is very clear that the PNM is now on the back foot. They are desperate. And there is a belief in the national community that given the momentum being carried by the United National Congress, given the daily meetings, the outlining of policies on a daily basis by the UNC and by Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar, we believe that the PNM is desperate. And therefore, they will stop at nothing, including attempting to steal the elections on April 28th or before through processes like these. And we are appealing to the public to keep vigilant, to ensure that we take all steps necessary to alert members of the UNC, to alert the relevant authorities on misconduct and or attempt to improperly conduct the elections and to corrupt processes within the EBC and in the conduct of the general elections. I want to remind you in closing that tonight we're in Sandy Grande on the junction across the road from the shops of Kunapo, close to the PTSC bus terminal. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll be in San Fernando West to be exact, at Pagoda Car Park, Independence Avenue, San Fernando. Meetings begin at 7 p.m. We have these campaign meetings tonight, Sandy Grande, tomorrow, San Fernando, as we continue our campaign. Remember, when the UNC wins, everybody wins. Come out and vote on April 28th. You cannot be fed up at home. There's a famous line I read recently, Wendy. It says that the elections is determined by everyone who show up at the ballot box. I thought that was an interesting line. Election results are determined by those who show up at the ballot box. It's not determined by those who fed up and stay home, by those who quarreling at home, quarreling at the junction, quarreling at the bars and restaurants. The result is determined by those who show up at the ballot box. So I want to appeal to persons to come out. Don't be fed up at home. Come out and vote. And when the UNC wins, everybody wins. Thank you very much. We'll take some questions from the press now.
MP, we'll get back to you. I just want some clarification from Ms. Lewis concerning the incident yesterday, right? So you can put right. So there was a series of events that you rolled out for us, right? I know one of the issues would have been initially the returning officer asking all of the agents to sign a blank form instead of the required E49 form.
A45.
E45. A45
yes.
form, right? I stand corrected, thank you. There was the instance of him not sealing the box. When
Correct.
he said he was going to seal the box in the presence of you all. But the first thing that you mentioned, that one of the PNM's person was notified. Can you clarify what they were notified about?
So initially, the ballot books are sent from the EBC.
Okay.
So on Saturday, they would have had the opening of those books.
Okay.
We weren't notified of that process. So the package with those books would have been opened in the presence of the PNM representative.
PNM representative, right?
None of the other two candidates were present to witness that procedure.
So the opening of the ballot box.
Yes, that's on the Saturday.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so is it that the PNM person left? Because I noticed that you mentioned the time that you and the Patriotic Front person left, but not the time of the PNM. So what happened
Yes,
there?
I did state that Mr. Mohammed left at 9:20 a.m. So as soon as the returning officer would have stated what the administrative process was, Mr. Mohammed took his departure.
So Mr. Mohammed did not stay to see all of the box?
No. He left at 9:20 a.m. and we both left at 1:15.
Okay, was this question, why did he leave by...
Not my place to question. I am focused on Ali Bokas.
Right. Okay, so he was not there to see whether or not the votes went in.
Correct. I'm back. No apologies.
All right. Okay, well, I guess MP can respond because I was asking the question whether or not anyone from the UNC would have reached out directly to the EBC, because I know you're sending a message here now for
The immediate removal of the returning officer, and based on all the lack of transparency and all the irregularities that would have taken place yesterday afternoon, we need the process to be redone. We need a fair and transparent process. I can't be asked to sign a form and then under the premise that we're going to seal a box. And then at the end of signing the form, we're dismissed. And then 2 hours later, I'm being asked to return to witness what? I have no idea what would have taken place in the 2 hours between 1:15 and 3:20. That in itself is just callous behavior. And we need to stand up for what is right. Dr. Moonilal.
Thank you very much. Yes, I understand the question. These matters came to our attention, of course, yesterday. And we immediately called a press conference, this event, to alert the national community. And also, the EBC is also part of the national community. We alert the EBC as well. But the attorneys are looking at this matter and drafting the necessary responses and so on. And we expect that we will be communicating with the EBC on this matter as well for the public record, because we have already announced the issues, we have already set out the complaint, and we have already made a demand on the EBC to remove the returning officer in the San Fernando East constituency, and of course to redo that process, which is now tainted, heavily tainted. And it matters not. I mean, the PNM representative may have left. One never knows. Maybe the PNM representative had an idea of what was happening and had full confidence and faith that something was happening and it was not his business. One can never tell in this business. So I'm saying that that process must be redone. The particular official of the EBC must be removed forthwith. And to say that the law doesn't provide for the EBC to remove anyone is, as I've said before in a very respectful manner, is wrong. It is wrong in law. And the EBC will have those powers, bearing in mind the Interpretation Act, bearing in mind other court judgments and so on, which we have outlined. And we are quite, we are quite ready to reply to the EBC if they would provide their legal advice on this matter. We are quite ready to reply. Our lawyers have considered this matter as well. So in the coming hours, we expect that the EBC would speak to this issue. I expect that if now the press conference is today at 2, finish at 3, we expect by 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, a responsible EBC to communicate to the national community and the UNC their position on this matter.
Right. Well, that's going to be my next question, because previously there was the issue, as you mentioned, before the constituency of Cuba, and the ABC basically came out to say that they don't have the power to remove the person. We saw what happened eventually. Yeah. So if a similar situation, a similar response is given, what is the UNC's next step?
Well, we'll have to consider, of course, all options. All options remain on the table, including litigation, including extraordinary vigilance that we may have to institute. I will not reveal the methods for a layer of extraordinary vigilance on the EBC and its conduct, but we may have to consider other methods as well to ensure that it is fair and it is free, the elections. We have some dates for the arrival of international observers, but as all of you can understand, when international observers arrive, the deed may have been done already. So they cannot go back in time now and change anything that happened. They can just observe, study the rules and procedure and observe as the moment they arrive. So that will not help us. And we are yet unclear about the arrival of international observers, particularly, I believe, from the Commonwealth and the Carter Center. We have heard a response from the CARICOM, but the others we have not. And Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar quite recently called on Prime Minister Stuart Young to indicate what is the latest position as it relates to observers from the Commonwealth and the Carter Center. And today we re-emphasize that call that the Prime Minister ought to speak urgently on the business of international observers from the Commonwealth and from the Carter Center.
Yeah, Commonwealth Secretariat.
The Commonwealth Secretariat and I believe the Carter Center. We have not had, to my knowledge, we have not had concrete responses as to their arrival and participation.
All right, okay, great. Apart from that, because you were mentioning some political meetings coming up, right? I saw in your recent political meeting, I mean, we have persons crossing the floor. You know, it's the election season. We're seeing it all the time. We saw former Attorney General John Jeremy at a UNC. A UNC meeting. Maybe to the surprise of some persons, not to the surprise of others. I want to know. I mean, in light of past controversies involving Mr. Jeremy, whether it's the Steve Ferguson extradition, the fallout with Satmaraj, even the recent Privy Council judgment, what's the opposition leader's take on Mr. Jeremy? How did that meeting come?
Well, Mr. Jeremy has served the country as Attorney General. As you know, he's a senior counsel as well. And he expressed, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, he expressed very strong views last evening on the governance facing this country. Mr. Jeremy, to our knowledge, has never had any disruptive problems with any matters. He has been in public life, and when you're in public life and you serve particularly in high executive office, there will always be issues raised surrounding conduct and so on, surrounding the conduct of public affairs. But Mr. Jeremy is unknown to any serious, scandal or problems and so on, to my knowledge. The other matter is that he has spoken from his heart, a deep concern for the situation in Trinidad and Tobago as it relates particularly to the economy, to security, to the future generations in this country. It was a heart-wrenching type of an account he gave last evening. We welcome Mr. Jeremy and others who have and will join us in the coming days. We welcome all, and I would like to remind persons who may not have been around in 1986, when several of us were very young, that it was actually a former Attorney General of the PNM, Mr. Selwyn Richardson, who joined the NAR a few days before the general election, and look what happened then. I can't predict these things, of course. I don't have a crystal ball, but what I can say is that Mr. Jeremy joins at an interesting juncture, and it's almost a replication of that NAR experience of 1986. So I don't know if the results will reflect that at all, but of course we are cautiously optimistic. There's a lot of work to be done, and we are doing that work throughout Trinidad. We are working extremely hard, the party, and we are seeing the positive results and the momentum. It's not only the momentum, but I think the energy level and the eagerness of the national community for change and to remove this government on the basis of corruption, waste, incompetence, and just heartlessness. I think people believe that the government itself has been, over 10 years, heartless. And this is why supporters of the PNM, former members, even activists, will find it almost a patriotic duty to support the United National Congress and our election campaign.
I mean, we also see some UNC persons now campaigning with some PNM candidates as well. What are your thoughts on that?
But that is their right, of course. I don't condemn anyone for exercising a constitutional right to support a party of their choice or not support a party. That is their right. And these things are common for elections and so on. Some of us have been around for a considerable amount of time in electoral politics. So nothing surprised with that. But the UNC, we always say, is a welcome to the big tent of the UNC, and there is room for all, and particularly those who share our values and our beliefs in equality, in justice, in national unity.
Final question. I mean, we usually see in Trini terms the pick-on against political parties when we go on the platforms coming up close to the election, but never really internally. We're seeing past UNC MPs having things to say, and we're seeing current UNC candidates are now throwing words to each other in the situation with Dr. Rai Ragri, for example. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not focused on that at all. In fact, I have no thought. I'm extremely focused on crime. I'm extremely focused because you asked me what are my thoughts. My thoughts are I'm extremely focused on strategies and policies to combat the criminal elements, to bring security to this country. I also share responsibility as a shadow minister in several areas. I'm concerned very much with housing, with the state of infrastructure, the collapse of infrastructure. Last night, I just want to repeat, in case you missed it, last night I raised this very troubling question of the issuance of a contract at the last hour before a general election for $98 million to repair the mosquito crack in South Trinidad, in the Otaheite area, where they have now issued a contract for $98 million presumably to fix the mosquito crack, when we were told in the parliament by Mr. Sinanan that would fall under the defect liability period. And in a miraculous twist, they have allowed the defect liability period to come to an end. And days after it came to an end, issued a new contract for the tune of, we believe, $98 million to repair the shoddy work on the Mosquito Creek area called the Mosquito Crack. And that is a big concern for me. Those matters are in my thoughts, but no other matters. Yeah.
Last night, Foster Cummins accused the UNC of paying social media influencers.
Mr. Foster Cummins is going.
Suppression tactic.
Mr. Foster Cummins is going. And he is desperate. And he will say any and everything, because I think Mr. Philip Watts is on his case. And we expect that the Lahokota Talparo seat will be returned to the United National Congress on election evening. So Mr. Cummins is very desperate. And this is a point I'll make now. The PNM is extremely desperate. Their campaign is no longer about performance. Well, it cannot be about performance. It is not about policy. It is just attacking in a most vile and desperate manner the UNC and our officials. I mean, I read the comment of Mr. Marvin Gonzalez, I believe, vis-a-vis Mr. Warner, and it is something I don't even want to repeat. I don't even want to contemplate that you can make comments like these, you know. Really, it is testimony to the desperation of the PNM when they arrive at comments like this. And so I say no more on that. Anything else? That's it. Well, let me thank all of you, members of the press in particular, for tuning in. and members of the UNC, supporters, activists, friends, family, well-wishers, and to remind you again that we are looking forward to your support on April 28th. Ensure you mobilize your families, your relatives outside of the home, your street, your village, your community, your cities, as the case may be, and everyone come out and vote on April 28th for the United National Congress, our coalition partners, the PEP, our coalition partner, the Congress of the People, our coalition partner, the Love Movement, which is running on the UNC ticket. We ask you to support the UNC on April 28th in the general elections, and remember, when the UNC wins, everybody wins. Thank you, and God bless you all.
When UNC wins,